Packed the casserole dish first. That probably sounds strange, but it was the first thing I put in the box when I started packing up my spare room. My grandmother's blue enamel casserole dish with the chipped lid and the faded flowers around the rim. I'd been storing it for my son. He asked me to hold on to it 2 years ago when he and his wife moved into a smaller place. I wrapped it in a dish towel, set it in the box, and then I just sat on the edge of the bed for a while. That was 3 weeks before I flew to Seattle. I should back up. My name is Lorene. I'm 64 years old. I worked as a school librarian for 31 years in the same district in Akron, Ohio. I retired at 62, which felt brave at the time and terrifying about 6 months later when I realized how quiet the house was. My husband passed away 11 years ago. Heart attack, very sudden, no warning. And since then, it's been me and the house and the garden and the phone calls that come less and less often. The older I get, I have one son. His name is Mitchell. He's 37. He lives in Seattle with his wife, whose name I won't say here, and their 2 children, a girl who just turned 8 and a boy who's 5. I love those grandchildren in a way that I don't have words for. I've seen them 6 times in 3 years. 6 times in 3 years. I don't say that to make you feel sorry for me. I say it because I want you to understand the context. I want you to understand why. When my son called me last November and said what he said, I believed him without question. I didn't hesitate. I didn't second guess. I just believed him. The way you believe someone you've loved since before they could walk. He called on a Sunday evening. I remember because I'd just made myself a small pot of soup, and I was watching the evening news. The phone rang, and it was Mitchell's name on the screen, and I turned the TV down and smiled before I even answered. "Mom," he said, "I've been thinking." He told me that Thanksgiving was coming up and that he and his wife had been talking, and they wanted me to come out to Seattle this year. Not just for Thanksgiving, but for the whole week. He said his wife wanted to cook, wanted to do it up properly, wanted the kids to have real time with their grandmother. "They talk about you all the time, Mom," he said. "My daughter keeps asking when you're coming. She wants you to sleep in her room." I held the phone and looked at the soup on the stove, and I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was tight. "Really?" I said. "We want you here. We want to celebrate you. We'll handle everything. Just get yourself on a plane." I said yes before he finished the sentence. I booked the flight 2 days later. Round trip Tuesday before Thanksgiving to the following Monday. I paid $387 on my credit card, which is not nothing on a retirement income, but I did not hesitate. Not even a little. I need to tell you something here, because the comments I got later, and I'll get to those, included some people who said, "Why didn't you confirm ahead of time? Why didn't you call to make sure? Why would you just show up?" And I want to be honest about something. I did confirm. I called Mitchell 3 weeks before the trip and said, "I just want to make sure everything's still on." And he said, "Of course, Mom, we can't wait." I texted him the night before I left and said, "Flying out tomorrow, landing at 2:40, just wanted to remind you." He sent back a thumbs up emoji. A thumbs up emoji. I told myself that was just how younger people communicated. I did not read anything into it. The morning of my flight, I wore my good gray cardigan. I have my small rolling suitcase and my carry-on tote bag, and inside the tote bag I had brought gifts. A book from my granddaughter about horses because she loves horses. A set of wooden building blocks for my grandson. A tin of those Ohio Buckeye candies that Mitchell has loved since he was a boy. And a bottle of wine that the woman at the shop said was nice for Thanksgiving. I had wrapped everything in tissue paper. I boarded the plane in Akron. I had a window seat, I watched the clouds, and I ate the little bag of pretzels, and I thought about what I would make for Thanksgiving dinner, whether I should offer to contribute a side dish, or whether that would seem like I was overstepping in her kitchen. I landed in Seattle at 2047 in the afternoon. I got off the plane and walked to baggage claim, and I stood at the carousel with all the other travelers, and I waited. I got my suitcase. I stood near the exit doors and I looked for my son's face in the crowd. He wasn't there. I told myself he was probably just running late. Traffic in Seattle is not easy. He'd told me that himself many times. I stood by the doors and I watched cars pull up and pull away, and I waited. 10 minutes. 15. I took out my phone. I called him. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Hey, it's me. I landed. I'm a baggage claim near door 4. Just give me a call when you're close. I waited another 10 minutes. I called again. Voicemail again. I found a bench near the windows and I sat down on top of my suitcase. There was no room on the bench itself. And I set my tote bag in my lap and I looked out at the gray Seattle sky and I thought, there must be an explanation. There has to be an explanation. There has to be an explanation. My son would not forget that I was landing today. 40 minutes passed. I called a third time. This time he answered. Mom. His voice had that particular flatness that I had heard before, usually when he was uncomfortable about something. Hey, sorry. Things got a pause. Things got a little hectic here, I said. Mitchell, I'm at the airport. I've been here almost an hour. Another pause. Longer this time. Yeah, okay, so the thing is, we ended up driving to Olympia this morning. My wife's college roommate is down here, and she's only in town for a few days, so we came to see her. We're going to head back tomorrow morning. I sat on my suitcase in the Seattle airport, and I let what he said settle into me. You're in Olympia, I said. Yeah, today, the day I was flying in. I know, I'm sorry. I thought you weren't coming until Wednesday. That was not true. We had talked about the dates. He had confirmed them. I had texted him the night before. I did not say any of this on the phone. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe because I was 64 years old and exhausted and sitting on my suitcase in an airport and I didn't have the energy to argue. Maybe because some part of me already understood something I wasn't ready to understand yet. Okay, I said. You can take a rideshare to our place. My wife left the key under the mat. My wife left the key under the mat. I was going to stay at my son's house alone while he and his wife and my grandchildren were in Olympia visiting her college roommate. Okay, I said again. I don't know why I keep saying that word. I think it was all I had. I took a lift to their house. $32. The driver was a young man who had worship music playing quietly and who asked me if I was visiting family. I told him yes. He said, That's nice. I looked out the window at the gray city. The key was under the mat. I let myself in. Their house smelled like someone else's laundry detergent, and something burned at the edges, like a candle that had gone too long. I set my suitcase by the door. I found the kitchen, and I put the kettle on, and I stood at the window looking at their backyard. There was a trampoline out there, one of those big ones with the safety net, and a red plastic slide that was listing a little to one side. Leaves everywhere. No one had raked. I found a mug in the cabinet. I made tea. I sat at their kitchen table. My granddaughter had drawn a picture that was stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet. A family of 4, drawn in crayon, tall person, medium person, small person, tiny person, all smiling. I looked at it for a long time. I ate crackers from their pantry for dinner because I hadn't had the presence of mind to get groceries on the way, and I went to bed early in the guest room that was also used for storage. I did not sleep well. In the morning, Mitchell sent a text that said they'd be back by dinner time. Then, at 2 in the afternoon, another text. Actually going to stay one more night, road is bad. I sat in his house and I looked around at the life he had built and I thought about the $800 a month I had been sending him. I should tell you about that. When Mitchell and his wife got married 6 years ago, they were struggling. He had just changed jobs. They had credit card debt. I was still working then, and I had some savings, and I thought, you know what I thought? I thought, this is temporary. I thought, I want to help my son get on his feet. I thought, this is what you do for family. The $800 started as $400, just for a few months. Then it became $600 because his wife lost her job for a period. Then it became $800 because there was the car repair, then the medical bill, then the cost of living in Seattle. Mom, you just don't understand how expensive it is. I sent that money every single month for 4 years. I want to be clear, I am not a wealthy woman. I have my pension and my Social Security and a modest amount in savings. I do not own a second home. I do not take vacations. The $800 a month was real money to me. It was the money I could have used to repair my porch steps, which I have been meaning to fix for 2 years. It was the money I could have put toward my own medical bills. Because I had a procedure last spring that wasn't fully covered and I'm still paying that down. I'm not saying this to make my son look bad. I'm saying it because I need you to understand what the whole picture looked like. They came home the next evening, the night before Thanksgiving. I heard them in the driveway. I heard the kids first, that tumbling, happy noise of children spilling out of a car, and I stood up from the couch where I'd been reading, and I walked to the door and I opened it. My granddaughter ran up the front path and threw herself at me. "Grandma!" she shouted, and I caught her and held her, and she smelled like French fries and something sweet, and I pressed my face into her hair. My grandson stood at the end of the path and looked at me very seriously, and then decided I was safe, and walked to me with his arms out. For a minute, holding both of them, I forgot everything. Then Mitchell came up the path. He hugged me with one arm quickly, already talking about how tired they all were from the drive, how the kids had been wild in the car, how he thought the turkey needed to be started tonight. His wife came in behind him and said hi to me the way you say hi to someone at a work function, warmly enough, but at a distance. She had been the one who left the key under the mat without a note. Not even a note saying welcome or I'm sorry, or here are towels in the hall closet. I helped with the turkey. I washed the dishes. I read to the grandchildren until they fell asleep. And I lay awake that night in the guest room, and I thought, when did I become someone who needed to make herself useful in order to be welcome? Thanksgiving itself was fine. The turkey was good. The kids were loud and happy. Mitchell's wife made a green bean casserole, and someone had brought rolls. We sat around the table, and I looked at my grandchildren's faces, and I was grateful. I was genuinely grateful. But there was a moment, just a moment, right after dinner when I was alone in the kitchen doing the dishes, and I could hear them in the living room, Mitchell and his wife, laughing at something on their phones, and the kids running around, and no one came to help me, and no one came to say thank you, and I stood at the sink, and I thought about the $800. I thought about the $800 every single month for 4 years. I thought about my porch steps. I thought about the medical bill I was still paying down. I thought about sitting on my suitcase in the Seattle airport for 40 minutes waiting for my son. I finished the dishes. The day after Thanksgiving, Mitchell mentioned, sort of casually over breakfast, that it might be a good time to talk about the money. He said things were still tight. He said the cost of living was really something. Seattle was really something. And he and his wife had been talking, and they were thinking maybe the monthly amount could go up a little. Just for a while, just until they got some things sorted out. I set my coffee cup down. I said, "Let me think about it." He nodded. He went back to his phone. I spent the rest of that day mostly with the grandchildren, which was the best part of the whole trip. My granddaughter taught me a card game she had made up herself, with rules that changed constantly, and a scoring system only she understood, and I played it for over an hour without complaint. My grandson fell asleep in my lap watching a movie about a dog, and I sat very still so I wouldn't wake him. I flew home on Sunday. Mitchell dropped me at the airport. He gave me a hug at the curb, a real one this time, and he said, "Thanks for coming, Mom. It meant a lot." And I looked at him, this man who had once been a small boy who climbed into my bed during thunderstorms, who had once called me crying from his first apartment because he didn't know how to make rice. And I said, "I know." I got on the plane and I flew home to Akron. For a week, I didn't say much to anyone. I went to my garden even though it was November and there was nothing to do there. I walked around the block in the mornings. I made soup. Then one afternoon I called my financial advisor. Her name is Peggy, and she's been managing the small account my husband left me for about 8 years. I told her I needed to make some changes. I told her I wanted to revise my beneficiaries. I wanted to look at my will. I also stopped the automatic transfer. No phone call. No explanation. Just stopped it. 3 days later, Mitchell called. "Hey, Mom, I think there might be a problem with the transfer. I didn't see it come through." "There's no problem," I said. I stopped it. Silence. "What? Why? Mom, Mitchell," I said, "I love you. I love you very much. But I'm 64 years old and I'm still paying down a medical bill. And my porch steps are broken. And I sat in the Seattle airport for 45 minutes on a suitcase while you were in Olympia. I can't keep doing this." He said some things after that. Some of them were apologetic and some of them were not. I let him talk. When he was done, I said, "We can talk more when you're ready." But the transfer is stopped and it's staying stopped. I hung up and I sat at my kitchen table and I looked at the window for a long time. Here's what happened in the months after that. My neighbor across the street is a woman named Faye. She's 71, retired teacher, twice widowed, sharper than anyone I know. We'd been friendly for years in that way where you wave from the driveway and occasionally share zucchini from the garden, but never quite become actual friends. After everything happened with Mitchell, Faye knocked on my door one Saturday morning with a coffee cake and said she'd noticed I'd been looking a little pale on my walks and she wanted to check in. I don't know why I told her everything. Maybe because she asked in the specific way that made clear she actually wanted to know. Maybe because I was tired of carrying it. We sat at my kitchen table for 3 hours that morning. She told me about her own estrangement from her older daughter, which lasted 7 years, and what she learned from it. She said, "You cannot pour out of an empty cup, Lorene, and you cannot fill anyone else's cup by draining your own." She came back the next Saturday. And the one after that, it has been 7 months now. Mitchell and I speak, but differently. He knows where I stand. He has not asked for money again. His wife called me once, a short and slightly stiff call, to say she was sorry about the airport situation. I thanked her. I meant it. My granddaughter calls me on the phone sometimes by herself, just to talk. Last week she called to tell me that her horse book character's name is going to be Grandma Lorene in the story she was writing. I cried a little when I hung up. The good kind. My porch steps got fixed in January. A man from church did it in an afternoon. Cost me $90 and a plate of brownies. I take a water box class on Tuesday mornings now, with Faye and 3 other women I didn't know 6 months ago. Afterward, we sometimes get coffee at the diner on Prospect Street and we sit there for an hour, sometimes longer, talking about nothing important and everything important at the same time. Last week, one of the women, a retired nurse named Claudette, said, "I don't know when I've laughed this much in a regular week." I thought about that on the drive home. I thought about the key under the mat, the thumbs up emoji, the bench in the airport, and then I thought about Faye knocking on my door with a coffee cake, about my granddaughter's horse story, about Claudette's laugh in the diner. You spend so long giving your energy to the people who take it for granted that you forget sometimes that there are people who will treat it like it's worth something. I haven't forgotten anymore. I still think about that casserole dish sometimes, the one I wrapped in a dish towel and packed into a box to return to Mitchell before the trip. I thought I was doing something kind, something generous. I thought he asked me to hold on to it, and now I'll bring it back, and that's what good mothers do. They hold things, they carry things, they return things without being asked twice. I didn't end up bringing it. I unpacked it the night before my flight and set it back on the shelf. I'm not sure why. Maybe some part of me already knew. What I've come to understand, slowly and not without some pain, is that the choices we make have weight, not in any cosmic or mystical sense, just in the plainest, most human sense. I sent $800 a month for 4 years, not because I was forced to, because I chose to, over and over again, even when it cost me things I needed. That choice had a consequence, and the consequence wasn't Mitchell's ingratitude, though that was part of it. The deeper consequence was what it did to me, what it trained both of us to expect. You cannot keep making the same choice and be surprised by the same result. That's not blame, that's just how things work. What I wish I'd had earlier was the clarity to tell the difference between love and appeasement. I loved my son. I still do, completely. But somewhere along the way I started confusing love with the act of making myself smaller so that he would stay comfortable. That's not wisdom, that's fear, dressed up as generosity. Real wisdom, the kind that takes a long time to grow, is knowing when to hold a boundary. Not out of anger, but out of self-respect. It's understanding that you can love someone and still say, "This is where I stop." Faye understood that. She lived it. 7 years of it. And she came out the other side, not bitter, but clearer. When she sat at my kitchen table that first Saturday morning and said, You cannot fill anyone else's cup by draining your own. She wasn't reciting something she'd read. She was telling me the thing she'd had to learn the hard way. I recognized the weight of it. That's the difference between advice and wisdom. Wisdom costs something first, and then there was the getting back up part. That's the piece people don't talk about enough. The part after you make the decision. After I stopped the transfer and had that phone call with Mitchell, there was a period, I won't pretend otherwise, where I wondered if I'd done the right thing, where I sat in my kitchen in the quiet and questioned myself. That's not weakness. That's what it actually feels like to hold your ground when it matters. The resolution isn't dramatic. It's mostly quiet and a little lonely. And then gradually it isn't. I fixed my porch steps. I went to water aerobics. I let Faye knock on my door. Those are small things. They are also the whole thing. My granddaughter called me last week. Just to talk. She asked if I had a middle name. And when I told her, she laughed and said it sounded like a character in a book. And I said maybe it was. And she said she was going to put me in her story anyway. I thought about that for the rest of the day. About being someone worth putting in a story. Not because I did anything extraordinary. Just because I finally decided that what I had left to give was worth something. And I stopped handing it to people who left me sitting on my suitcase.